What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. So before I get into this video, I want to give a shout out to Daryl Sloan for his contribution to the channel via the Cash App. Much respect to Daryl Sloan for showing love to this channel. He's been a subscriber and sub to this channel for quite some time. Like me, he's a basketball or NBA historian, definitely. And like me, he has a passion for the old school players and for them to get recognition. We've had a discussion about a particular player who should have been inducted into the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame a long time ago. And hopefully next year in the 2022 ceremony, he will be inducted, although it will be posthumously. And you'll see who we're talking about in the video. It'll either be tonight or tomorrow. But this guy should have been in the Hall of Fame a long time ago, and it's due. You know, you have some guys getting in. You know, I'm not questioning their Hall of Fame credentials. A lot of them are, all of them are. But this guy should have been in. He's definitely the goods. And so shout out to him and shout out to everybody that supports this channel. If you want to donate to this channel, you can do so in the links in the description box below. And I also have a Patreon that you can sign into as well. Now, um, I want to talk about something different on this in this particular video, and that is the psychological component of sports. I don't think that gets talked about enough. You know, if you play video games and you haven't really played sports, confidence means a lot. Confidence and your mental well-being. And sometimes certain things can get into your head. And you can do things, an athlete can just do things impulsively that they know they shouldn't do. You know, and it could just be some type of psychological illness or something in your head is making you um, overthink or making you do something because in your back of your mind you don't think you belong there. One thing that comes to mind is, for instance, Andrew Galata. Andrew Galata had both of those fights won against Riddick Bowe, but yet he couldn't control himself with the low blows, and it makes no sense. It made absolutely no sense what he was doing out there. But there's a psychological aspect of sports that people really need to understand better. You know, there could be you could be a 320 hitter career, right? And you could cook every all-star pitcher. But there's one particular pitcher who isn't special. I mean, matter of fact, he may be subpar or just average. But this one guy, you just can't figure out as a pitcher. It's just everybody else hits almost 300 off this guy. But you're hitting 180, and you don't understand why. And it's just things like that that make sports interesting. You've heard Charles Barkley and Shaq and all these other guys. You know, you talk. You know, Isaiah Thomas had problems with Steve Coulter, the crooked leg move guy, right? It's these particular guys who anybody else you're saying, like if you're just thinking, you look on paper, man, he should kill this motherfucker. But then you look and you know, Steve Coulter got 18 points and 8 assists, and Isaiah got 11. What the fuck is going on? You look in Brian Country Reeves has 31 points and Shaq has 13. You didn't see that coming. It's just how it is. But then there's this interesting dynamic when it comes to the NBA, and it's foul shooting. Now, of course, that's relevant right now because everybody gets on Giannis and being unable to make free throws, and he's unskilled and all that. But I want to bring up the curious case of Nick Anderson. Nick Anderson. Nick Anderson. Now, I'm not going to act like Nick Anderson was a perennial all-star, but he wasn't a bad player at all. Nick Anderson was a star player at the University of Illinois in the 80s, Mr. Basketball one. And he was the first ever player drafted by the Orlando Magic. I think it was 1989 draft. And he had a solid rookie year. I think his rookie year, I think his rookie year in 89, 90, I think the rookie of the year was David Robinson. But still, he had a solid rookie year. Nobody was going to win it over David. But Nick Anderson had a solid rookie year. And by the 91-92 season, he was averaging just a hair under 20 points a game. And he was the Orlando Magic's first real star. As a matter of fact, I want to say, let me Google this right quick because I may be misremembering this. Maybe he didn't have a 50-point game. I could have sworn Nick Anderson had a 50-point game. Yeah, he did. 1992-93, Nick Anderson had a 50-point game coming off the bench in three quarters. That was Shaq's rookie year. So this is a guy that had game. And back then, Nick wasn't a guy that just hanging around the 3-point line. He could take it, he could slash the basket, play in the post a little bit, mid range. He had a real game. You know what I'm saying? And after they acquired Shaq, of course, in '92, and then the draft day trade for Penny Hardaway in '93, and then they got Dennis Scott out of Georgia Tech in '92, I believe it was. They became a squad. Penny replaced what's his face? Who was their point guard, man? White boy, balding, has the record for assists. You guys know what I'm talking about, but I'm fogging as to his name right now. But anyway, it'll pop my head eventually. But Penny Hardaway replaced him at point guard, and they became an entirely different team. Now, at that, because of the stars they had, Nick Anderson became more of a role player, but he still was a solid contributor. And remember, it was Nick Anderson who came up with that clutch play against Michael Jordan, stealing the ball in the 1995 semifinals in a pivotal game in that series. The Bulls ultimately lost that series in six. And it was Nick Anderson that had that heroic steal, which led to I think he stole it. I think it was him that fed it to Horace Grant for that game sealing dunk. And, you know, Nick Anderson at that time had to be flying high. And it looked like Orlando, once the Bulls were knocked off, because people still weren't taking Houston all that seriously, thinking it was still a fluke. Six seed win a championship, it's going to end eventually. And it looked like that was the reality because people were favoring Orlando. And Orlando had a 20-point lead early on in that first game. But then it came down the stretch. I can't remember the score. I want to say it was something like 111, 108 or 110, 107 or something like that. 20 in regulation. And Nick Anderson gets fouled. He just needs one free throw because one free throw would make it a two-possession game with not much time left on the clock. It would have been a three wouldn't have won it, and they would have won the game. And I think mentally that may have made that series go a whole nother way for Orlando, even though they would have blown the lead. Nick Anderson misses a free throw. Then he misses a second free throw. But fortunately, he gets his own miss and gets fouled. So he gets a chance to redeem himself. So he thinks fate is giving him a chance to redeem himself. But then he misses The third one. I think that's the reaction he had right there. That's when he realized, man, that's when the pressure was cooking on him because I got to knock down one of these free throws. Now, prior to this, at this moment, Nick was uh, he was a good, not great free throw shooter, 70%. Um, but still, not a guy you would think would miss four free throws in a row. You know what I'm saying? And Scott Skiles is the guy I was thinking about. Scott Skiles, point guard. 30 assists in the game, Orlando Magic versus, I think, Denver Nuggets. December 30th, 1990? I think it was. But anyway, interestingly enough, didn't lead the NBA in assists that year. It was John Stockton. I think he averaged like 8.5 or something assists that year. But anyway, he misses the fourth. Houston gets the ball. Kenny Smith, who was rolling that day, pump fakes on Penny Hardaway, gets a good look. Hits his, at the time, NBA record 7 3-pointer, finals record. 7 3-pointers. Sends the game to overtime. We knows what happened. We know what happened. Ultimately, uh, Clyde Drexler drives, loses the ball. Uh, I think he drove for the layup, misses, but Kim Olajuwon tips it in for the winning score, and they came back and won game one, and that was it. Uh, Even though the series wasn't over, Orlando never, I think, recovered from that loss, and they lost in four. But the real victim was Nick Anderson. Nick Anderson was never the same player afterwards. Nick Anderson, a guy who would slash and look for contact, wasn't afraid of that shit, was a dog. He was one of their dudes. You know what I'm saying? On a championship team, you need a guy that's gonna punch a motherfucker in his face, gonna step up and, you know, it wasn't. He was never the same psychologically. He admitted it years later that that shit fucked with his head. It fucked with his head, and he never really recovered from that. The next year, the 95, 96 season, I think it was, one of those years, he shot 40% from the line. He never shot well again from what I could recollect from the line, and he did everything he could to stay away from the free throw line. By that I mean he basically just became a 3-point shooter. He became that. That's all I remember. For the rest of his years with Orlando, and I think I remember him playing with the Grizzlies. He played with maybe another team. I just remember Nick Anderson shooting threes. And the primary reason for that, he did not want to go to the foul line anymore. And when he did go to the foul line, you could look into his eyes and see that he was overthinking. And he would knock down some, but his misses were atrocious. And you could just see that that shit fucked him up. And that's what I'm talking about with the psychological component of sports. Will Chamberlain, when he first came to the NBA, was not great, but his percentage wasn't the worst. He was like 62, 63% from the foul line at first. And remember, Wilt was shooting a lot of free throws back then. I mean, this is a guy that was going to the foul line shit, uh, 13, 14 times a game. So he was making a lot of free throws. But over time, the criticisms of him missing free throws and the lack of confidence made him worse and worse and worse to the point where he had one year with the Sixers where he shot only 38% from the line, and he was only a 51% career free throw shooter. Shaq was never really good, but he even got worse. Some of it you can attribute to getting stronger with Wilt and Shaq as you get stronger. It affects your release. That's part of it. But a lot of it with them was psychological. Shaq used to be like 57, 58% from the foul line when he first came to the league. But then, in his later years, with the exception, I remember one year, might have been when he was with Miami, but I remember it was one year, Shaq shot 62% from the line, which for him is like Rick Barry. but usually he shot under 50% from the line. And I have to say, a lot of it is psychological, man. It's just something there. Look, I'm even willing to say that part of what was affecting Joe Harris was psychological in the semis with Brooklyn. There were wide open looks, but I'm trying to tell people pressure is something that you don't is not registered or picked up with analytics. People like Nick Wright like to bring up numbers and stats and well, Joe Harris is one of the great 3-point shooters. Look at his numbers. Yeah, it's easy to. I'm not saying it's easy to make threes, but it's easier to make threes when Brooklyn's on a run and you're up by 15 points. It's easier. But when your team is down and they need a bucket, can you still make those shots at those same high, consistent rates? Larry Bird doesn't have the highest 3-point percentage, but I tell you what, if I had to choose between Larry Bird and Joe Harris to make a shot for me at the end of the game, guess who I'm going to choose? If I had to choose between, uh, Jason Capono or shit, even Antoine Walker, who never had a good percentage. But if I had to choose one of them to make a shot for me, I'm going with Fat Butterball Walker, just based off of watching him play. Now, Steph Curry is a whole nother thing, you know what I'm saying? But you see, this is the point I'm trying to make. A lot of times, there is a psychological component to making shots and free throws. Free throws seem easy. They seem like an easy shot. It is. And it's an easy shot to make in an empty gym, you know? That's why a lot of people are very critical of the bubble. It's a whole different thing to make shots in the bubble when there's not really any crowd. Tyler Hero, Tyler Hero, Tyler Hero. But it's something different when there's a crowd there cheering against you, and you got all these objects in the background that's trying to deflect you, and people cursing at you, saying whatever the fuck they want to say, all rooting against you, and that pressure gets to you. That's why some guys like Reggie Miller and some guys like Jordan and Kobe, Magic and Bird are so celebrated because, and Elijah Wan, another one, Jerry West, they elevated their games under pressure. That's why some people have been critical of Paul George because he's a guy who, although he does have that superstar game, he can be rather inconsistent when it's pressure. Sometimes he rises, but then sometimes, a lot of times, he fails. And he has shown that shit can get into his head, and it gets into his head, and he thinks about it. But that's all I'm saying in this video to to recognize the psychological component and pressure of sport. But tell me what you guys think.